Yeah, the latest Marvel Snap season has been officially revealed, which means we've got a lot of cards to discuss at length and lock in my final predictions for just how powerful they're going to be, rating them from 1 to 4 stars. So that said, let's go ahead and kick things off here with the new season pass card. This is Shadowlands Daredevil. And I was just thinking the art on this one looks really funny. It seems like this little ninja guy is like tiny and like hanging on to his leg. Like, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be in the background, but I don't know. For all I know, Shadowlands Daredevil carries around tiny little ninjas. I don't know. Anyway, he is now a 2-3. I think this was a 2-2 when we first saw it data mined very, very, very long ago. The on reveal is rewritten a bit, but functionally the same. On reveal, shuffle in 3 demons, those being the 1/6 demons we know from the hood. When you draw a card with 6 or more power, Shadowlands Daredevil will then gain +2 power. So that could be one of the demons you have shuffled in nicely at 6 power. Could be anything else big. Could be a Galactus, a Galacta. Could be a Destroyer. Whatever you want here. For Shadowlands Daredevil, the potential to actually gain a lot of points. Now, you're playing this on turn 2 with this on reveal. That means, normal game, you're drawing on turn 3, 4, 5, and 6. If all 4 of those draws were 6 power or more, which pretty likely if you're playing this, your deck's going to be stuffed with a lot of bigger things. Very good chance you gain +8 total points here for your Shadowlands Daredevil, making him a 2/11. Maybe you only get 6, making him a 2/9. I would argue in either case, that's still pretty far above rate for a 2-cost card. So kind of a powerhouse, that 2-cost slot, similar to other things we've seen lately, the Chambers, the Moondragons, etc. Actually getting to those numbers. And those cards often do actually get nerfed lately, we've seen too. Those big scaling 2-drops that can kind of be played in more generalized decks a little bit tend to do that. I mean, Moondragon and Chamber were both sort of specialized, but not across like a normal archetype like Destroy, for instance, where some of the 2-drops like Archangel didn't quite get there with the objective stuff. So I do think this lives a little bit more in that generalized camp where a lot of different decks could run this as, effectively a 2/9 in many cases. Now, the question for this one really becomes, are those demons an advantage or a downside? Do you like drawing 1/6 demons or do you hate drawing 1/6 demons? Now, let's be clear. A 1/6 is a really good card, and we know demons really nice to have. We see Hood getting played a ton, especially anytime you can get multiple of those demons or have some kind of generation bonus to it, stuff like Victoria Hand, for instance. Now, specifically, Victoria Hand would not buff these demons because these are not created in hand. They're going to be created in deck specifically, and she only looks at hand. So Victoria Hand herself, not a synergy, but there are some created card synergies. For instance, King Eitri could be a way to get a bonus draw off of one of these created cards now put into your deck. So that not only helps you find a powerful card in a demon, but also is an extra draw, which could be an extra boost on your Shadowlands Daredevil. So like a turn 1 Eitri, turn 2 Shadowlands Daredevil, actually pretty strong output already. That might push your Daredevil up to that like 13 power level. You could technically use stuff like Nico or Crystal, whatever additional location card draw, to get him even bigger. Like it is technically possible to get this up like 15, 17, whatever, who knows. Opponents playing, Ronin deck running Maximus. Hey, even more bonuses. But generally, I would expect this to kind of live in that 9 to like 13 power range from an average game. But anyway, I think the demons are actually going to be an upside. Yes, you will dilute your deck. Yes, you will be less likely to draw other cards you have put in your deck. Some decks would just absolutely never want to do that because they have key cards they're trying to hit, key curve hits. If you're playing a Wiccan deck, you just can't play this because you got to find Wiccan, right? You want to have Wiccan, you don't want to have demons. Wiccan decks never play this, of course. I think some decks, though, are totally fine drawing 1/6 demons as long as their curve is balanced in a way that drawing a few demons wouldn't just like totally kill them and they'd run out of things to do because they can't kind of spend enough energy to fill. As long as they have like a sufficiently mid-rangey to high-end cost deck, I think the demons are just good draws. I think they're like nice little flexible tools that you can weave in that also just, are great hits for your Shadowlands Daredevil. So I am a little bit like curious where exactly deck construction goes on this. I kind of need to sit down and look at sort of archetypal decks that are good right now and what exactly Daredevil fits into. Some decks won't want him. I think some can probably sustain him. How many does he actually make better is a question. And does he like carve out his own 6 power or more kind of deck that's like its own separate thing? Those are multiple possibilities. I think you actually could maybe just build a 6 power or more deck with a lot of kind of mid-rangey cards. I actually think stuff like Red Skull decks, like Sauron Red Skull, or just big dude decks, as we've called those historically as well, might also be fine because you just have a lot of higher powered cards. You're fine playing out tempo. You're fine filling in with 1/6s around your Star Brands and your Red Skulls and stuff. Like there would be some draws in there, like maybe Zeros or Saurons or something that don't necessarily support Daredevil, but enough pieces that do that it might be fine. This could even be a card that gets big enough to maybe support like a Scar discount, right? And 2-drop discounting your Scar is not something you've always seen in those sorts of lists, but it's not impossible to get this guy to 11 by turn 6, like we said. So ultimately, I do think this card has some nice raw power output. I don't really think the demons are necessarily a downside, certainly in some decks, but I think they can just be really high quality draws. The decks can definitely tank drawing 1 or 2 of them, even if they still kind of prefer to get regular cards normally. And I think that means this is pretty promising. I don't think it's like a home run, all-star, meta-defining kind of guy just yet, but I do think really nice, solid, good card that will find a deck or two to shine. So next up here is Wilson Fisk. This is 5/9. He costs 3 if you have the highest power among cards in play. So another card here that just likes having big dudes in your deck and specifically in play. There's kind of a couple angles for this. I think number one is like, play the biggest 2-drop. If you have a Lizard in your deck, Maximus, whatever, theoretically even a Shadowlands Daredevil coming down on 2 might get pushed up to 5. That's often honestly going to be big enough to trigger your Wilson Fisk to play on turn 3 as a 3/9, which, 3/9's not amazing. Like, we have 3-drops that certainly can scale to bigger than that, but it's also solid, right? That's bigger than the like Gladiators, bigger than Debris, some of these sort of 3-drops with downsides. Wilson is effectively a 3-drop instead of a 5-drop, and you're not mad about playing a 3/9 in many cases. It's almost up to that like Star Brand level we talked about, right? So if you have a big 2-drop, honestly, even some 1-drops would carry through to turn 1, like, Hydra Bob or whatever. You could throw a Martyr in your deck or something. She's actually 6 power now, right? Which is pretty cool for Shadowlands Daredevil. They mentioned that in the patch notes. So, few angles there to get this down on turn 3. But also, if you're running a bigger dude deck and you have a big 4-drop, big 5-drop, whatever, playing a Wilson Fisk on turn 6 might also be a possibility as well, where you just kind of weave him into that final turn alongside another 3-drop for some cool flexibility. So I don't hate this. I will say, 3 or 4 months ago, I would have been really high on this card, and I would have said like, yeah, just like good, honest numbers like this can work. We're still in the air a little bit on like how all these nerfs are going to land to Shu Lao and Star-Lord and Fin Fang Foom, but just generally speaking, a Marvel Snap trend has been higher power values, really crazy scaling, big numbers. And I will say in that current era of Marvel Snap, kind of big dumb numbers like this don't tend to work quite as effectively, right? Like playing a 3/9 and another 3-drop on turn 6 might not just be able to keep up with the really high octane stuff that opponents' decks will do on average. So not as confident in this sort of card as I perhaps used to be or would have been, but maybe, they are doing some things to lower those ceilings. We just saw those nerfs. We saw changes to how the repeat effects, the Wongs and so on of the world work as well. So does that indicate a little bit more range for this card to find success as just an honest 3/9? Another comparison I have for this card in my mind a lot is like Mockingbird, where, Mockingbird is a 9-power card that, you want to get down to 0, but there's so many games where you end up playing your Mockingbird for like 3 or 4 energy, and you're not mad about it. Like, you're actually pretty okay. It's like, oh yeah, I have a couple things down to discount my Mockingbird. It's turn 3. I got a 3/9 Mockingbird. Like, yeah, that feels good. I'm just going to play that. Can Fisk live in that space where it's just like, yeah, it kind of feels good? The challenge there is it doesn't go beyond that. There's never that 0/9 Fisk that's just crazy good. So, that's nice that Mockingbird has a reasonably good floor, but also this crazy high ceiling, and that, getting her down to 0 is a really strong play. Fisk is just more in the middle there. which may not be quite good enough. I think they could maybe have gotten away with pushing the numbers on this card just a little bit higher, because he has that tighter power band. Like, he can't go crazy. Could you push this to 10 or 11? I think so personally, but I still think this card's okay. I kind of just want to play some big dumb guys, whether it's Daredevil or otherwise, and see if Fisk can't just get there on the back of some big 2-drops. All right, moving on here to Karen Page. This is a 4/5. On reveal, give one of your 1, 2, and 3 cost characters +2 power each. So another card here playing into some stat boosting. We've had a lot of cards that just love buffs and getting buffs and just lots of buff stuff lately. Most recently, Storm, Horseman of Famine is a great buffer. This one in a little bit of a different direction with that onboard buff. And, you know, it is clearly just 11 points in total output if you have the 1, 2, and 3 cost characters in play when you play Karen Page, which you probably do realistically often want to play this on turn 4, of course, as a 4-cost card. But it's nice that you can still play her on turn 6 and realize the benefit, of course. That's pretty cool. But I think the dream is on turn 4, you would have really isolated targets. You could imagine a dream scenario where it's like turn 1 Agony, turn 2 Lasher, turn 3 Captain Carter or whatever, right? And then Karen Page comes down on turn 4 and you're buffing 3 key buff targets, because Agony can then give those buffs into like a turn 5 Maverick or whatever, right? And then Lasher loves scaling your buffs, and Captain Carter obviously loves scaling your buffs. So clearly being able to magnify those buffs into another layer or more with cards like Captain Carter is really, really valuable. It's just a question of how often are you hitting that perfect kind of curve or scenario? Like, what does the deck structure look like where you make sure you have targets? In fact, does this go a different direction almost and go into like a Quicksilver Domino style line where you guarantee that you have a 1 and a 2, and then you kind of try to use Karen Page as a Wiccan alternative where you just go for stats? I don't think that's worth it, because it's not that crazy of a stat output. 411 is like still just kind of straightforward. So I don't think that would be necessary. I think you kind of have to have those buff targets to make it right. It's just, you know, missing 1 hit, basically this card falls off, I think, really fast in its total power output. So it's that, and it's just competing against so many other options. When you're talking about those buff decks, right, you've got the Gwynpools, the Galactas, now you've got like Wolverine Horseman of War that's doing both. It's like a buff recipient and a buff outputter, and it's more total numbers as well. So like, does this exceed Gwynpool? Is it better than Gwynpool? It could be, right? Like, Gwynpool's been a great card, although I think she's fallen off a bit recently. I think it's possible that it finds like the perfect deck where it has enough of those key targets, and it's like, I love the onboard buffs more than I love the hand buffs. I do think it's probably more likely, though, that this kind of falls in a gap where it's just like, yeah, it's playable, it's good enough, but who's going to want to spend tokens on it if it's not like the star and the best option, and you already have a lot of really good options that do such similar things? How is this going to carve out a niche, basically, where this gets there? I think about Namora decks a little bit with this one. That's maybe a good angle because they do like those onboard buffs a fair bit better. So there's a few things to consider. Just I'm not quite as high on this as you could be, perhaps. I think it's just got a lot of competition. All right, next up here is Punisher War Machine. This character looks so sick to me. I've always loved War Machine ever since I was a kid. Is this War Machine like decorated as the Punisher, or Punisher wearing a War Machine suit? Lore enjoyers in the comments, let me know, because this looks so sick to me. Anyway, Punisher War Machine here is a 2/2. Reads, when drawn, mark one of your empty locations, and then objective, win that location, and if you do win that location, you gain +1 max energy. So basically, Punisher War Machine needs to be in play to check that objective, and he will do that at the end of the phases, after end of turn effects go off, objectives check. If you're winning that marked location at that point, you will gain +1 max energy, which we know ramp can be super powerful, right? Electro, Luna Snow, etc. Very commonly seen cards. Shooting out big stuff's great. And theoretically, this gives you that opportunity to ramp even earlier, because you could hit this on turn 2 and win. I think the best case scenario for this card is basically like, draw this in your opening hand alongside a big 1-drop, so that as soon as you draw this on that opening turn, he marks an empty location. You play a big 1-drop out to get yourself a nice lead in that spot. and then you play your Punisher on turn 2. The hard part, of course, is that Punisher is pretty small himself at only 2 power, so you kind of often might need that head start a little bit to make sure you're winning that given location. Now, a big question I have for this one, I don't know, is does your opponent see the marked location? Because that does 2 things. Tell them you have the Punisher number 1, so it kind of gives them information about your deck probably. But number 2, it helps them contest it. Like if it's marked on turn 1 and they see it, then they could play their 1-drop in that spot to help get out ahead and prevent your War Machine from winning. So that's really hard to say, because I think that does actually change the power level on this rather notably. Like if the opponent gets that information and gets out ahead, that could be tough. If you miss your 1-drop, you also might be in a pickle, because a 2/2 is not that good at contesting by itself, right? You don't want to just throw this out on turn 2 and kind of hope for the best, because pretty easy for opponents to beat that, especially if they see that given marked location. So a little bit more risk baked into this ramp basically than our other ramp cards. Like your Electro, it's going to work. Your Luna, it's going to work. I mean, of course the cube can be removed, etc., but it's reliable enough. Wave, it's going to work. Punisher War Machine, don't know if it's going to work, and it does probably change your deck construction a little bit, because you might want some more tempo-y low cost cards in order to better support your Punisher War Machine. Because if you're trying to rely on 3-drops, 4-drops, etc., to get that War Machine active, then you've kind of missed some of those key windows to actually ramp up, and you might only get your max energy for a turn or 2. So definitely a little bit of a different look here, moving things into a different direction. There's also the conversation about when you draw the Punisher War Machine, right? So like if you draw this too late, again, going to be really hard to support this. And that's true of, Electro and Luna and everybody else too, right? Like, you don't play those on turn 5 to only ramp up for turn 6. So not like a specific extra downside here, just noteworthy that, it's a kind of really tight window on this card to feel good and playable, because it doesn't really impact in stats in any way. So I'm really torn on this one, because I think this upside, when it hits, is crazy strong. And like 1 extra energy is nuts. And I could even see this being in like a Wiccan deck where you have Quicksilver on turn 1, even if it's not really big. Still, a lot of decks just don't have a way to contest early. So you play Quicksilver on 1, Punisher on 2, Wiccan then is on turn 3. And you just have this crazy extra energy to play towards. Like that could be an absolutely monster energy ramp deck that's not as reliant on kind of big stuff and can kind of fill in the curve a little bit with some of those tempo plays, or just rely on Quicksilver specifically. So I think there are options. At the same time, like, man, this could whiff a lot, and it might feel like kind of a dead card in your deck. And a lot of ramps decks just run like powerful 2-drop cards, get the chambers or whatever in there to just give you big point contributions as opposed to another ramp angle. So man, this one's tough to say. It's really threading the needle for me on like, could be busted, could be insane, but also could just kind of be so awkward and hard to activate consistently that it sort of disappears. It feels like one of those cards that if somebody solves the deck, I believe in it. So I'm going to probably go ahead and give this the nod as a powerful card. At the same time, I wouldn't be shocked if it kind of goes nowhere. So next up here is Muse. This is a 3/3 ongoing +3 power for each location where one of your cards has been destroyed. So a little bit of a sideways destroy payoff and synergy here. This I mean, it's a 3/12 if things go well, right? That's +9 total on your ongoing 3/12. It's good stat output for a 3-drop, right? Way above expectations for a 3-drop. That's all great. It's another one of those cards, though, where I look at this and I'm reminded kind of a lot of the objective cards we had over the last couple of months, actually. Not that this is an objective card, but it's just one of those cards that it fits. It has an archetype. It's a pretty good card in that archetype, I bet. Like, it puts out the numbers you want, but at the same time, it's kind of just like forgettable in the sense that you don't necessarily need it anymore. Like, so many of these like destroy cards, ongoing cards, affliction cards, whatever, right? They're in that world where it's like, yeah, this is good. I would definitely play this in a destroy deck and expect it to be a nice card. But at the same time, I have my destroy deck. This is not so much better or really even better necessarily that I need to go out and get this card. It's not, archetype defining or reshaping or that inspirational for a destroy deck. You know, that's like, I've got Deadpool as my win condition. I've got Null. I've got Deaths. Like, those are my powerhouse cards. I don't really need a Muse necessarily. So the question then becomes, can you go in a different direction with this one to find an angle for it? I think there are some possibilities of kind of like sideways destroy decks. I'm thinking about stuff like, you know, Thanos destroy, where you've got like Killmonger in a Thanos deck. You're wiping out your stones to discount your death. You know, a Squirrel Girl or stones across multiple locations. Killmonger makes it super easy to get all 3 locations triggered for Muse. Then it's like, okay, I got a 3/12 in my Thanos deck. Like, is that worth it? You know, is there some weird Aurora destroy hybrid where I need an ongoing for a destroy deck? Like, I don't know, right? Like, you're trying to think of creative ways to use this. They don't ever really sound that good to me. They sound like you're really stretching it and really forcing it and just trying to carve out a space for Muse that maybe doesn't really need to exist. So then it just becomes a question, like, is a 3/12 or, you know, a 3/12 with risk, because sometimes like a location might be closed off or something and you only get a 3/9 out of this. Is that good enough to replace something that's currently in a destroy deck? Like, can you disrupt that balance of the best destroy decks and remove like a destroy activator or a Deadpool synergy or, you know, whatever it is? I don't think so. But at the same time, I think there's just nothing wrong with this card. Like, I'm sure you could toss it in and it would be totally fine. So it's just good, solid option, but not maybe disruptive enough or important enough to really make the cut. So it's like, yeah, if you want to play this, it looks fun to you, probably fine. Also, I suspect it will be totally fine if you do not acquire this card. All right, so moving on here to Lady Bullseye. This is a 2/2 with on reveal, afflicted enemy card with -2 power. Repeat on a different enemy for each of your unspent energy. So another unspent energy synergy card, kind of like, you know, Sunspot. This scales based on the amount of unspent energy that you have. But there is an important distinction here, specifically that this is an on reveal, not an end of turn. And this is not looking at like energy across the game. This is looking at your current unspent energy. So what that does mean is, like, you know, if say you normally would skip turn 5 for a She-Hulk deck, right? And you have Sunspot down, he would normally gain 5. You discount your She-Hulk by 5. Well, that might also be the turn you want to play Lady Bullseye, because that's when you're anticipating floating as much energy as you can. But now you're spending 2, so you're only floating 3. Which, when you look at Lady Bullseye, that's actually still great, because if you're floating 3, that means you have 4 total afflictions here, because there is one at a base. There's a baseline when afflict an enemy card with -2 power, and then the repeat is based on your unspent energy, so you'd have 3 extra on top of that, right? So that would be -8 power afflicted to your opponent's board, plus the 2 power for Lady Bullseye. A net output of 10 points for a 2-cost card would be pretty great, although if you really think about it, it's kind of a 5-cost card at that stage, which then you say, well, 8 power or 10 power for a 5-cost card, not as exciting, right? Like, you know, afflictions have additional synergies and upsides and can scale if they hit the right targets and stuff, but a little shakier. So if you're going to do that, you need to make sure that unspent energy is paying off in other ways, like Sunspot, Warlock, She-Hulk, but then you're also, you know, kind of losing some upside on Sunspot, losing some discounts on She-Hulk. So it's just this complicated little soup of like, well, numerically speaking, like, yeah, Bullseye is worth more points than Sunspot, but then I'm also thinking about those She-Hulk discounts and so many other aspects. So where's the like sweet spot, and how do I really utilize this most effectively? I don't really know that a Sunspot deck wants to go for this or not. You have to ask, like, okay, well, what if it's just like turn 4 and instead of playing, you know, like High Evo or whatever, I play Lady Bullseye instead and I float 2, and that, you know, that helps my Sunspot, my Cyclops, my, you know, Misty Knight, whatever, but also I get, you know, 2 extra afflictions here. That would be -6 total, the base, and then 2 more, 6 total points of affliction. That's kind of a 2/8 or 4/8 again, if you think about it. Like, that's okay, right? Again, it's like, it's looking pretty good. It all sounds good until you start considering the wasted energy as part of the equation on the you know, cost to power ratio. So I don't know. Now, a totally different angle to consider for this is like going crazy with, you know, you could do Symbiote Spider-Man into the Fallen one and have a turn where you have like, you know, whatever, 13 to who knows, even more bonus energy at the end of the game, where you have that final turn where you just go nuts. And then it's like, well, what if I float 10 energy for Lady Bullseye, and then she impacts the entire board, right? You need 12, I guess, to guarantee you hit the entire board. Is that worth it? Well, probably still no, right? Like, it's always just tied to, you know, it's 1 energy for a -2 power affliction. So maybe you'd only need 11 since she has a base one and there's only 12 spots, but you get the idea. I don't really know that I ever feel like it's super worth it. It just depends on perhaps how many other cards are also benefiting from that unspent energy at the same time. And I think there's just kind of a ceiling on how good that all feels. You know, of course, we do also have Abomination in high Evo decks that can be an additional way to benefit from that affliction aspect, discounting your Abomination. So that's another hook and bonus here. You know, I will say again, I think this is probably fine if you put this in a high Evo deck. I think it looks like it fits. It has the energy aspect and the affliction aspect, which both tie together into that. So it's like, yeah, I think it's probably good. At the same time, I don't know that it's so efficient to me that you have to have it there. You know, probably just helps a little at best, and you'd probably be fine without it as well. So I think a solid option, just nothing crazy. So another card here that might benefit from affliction synergies. This is Ikari, a 4/12. You can only play this where an enemy is afflicted with negative power. So another kind of big 4 cost with limitations. This one is a little bit bigger than some of the other, like 4/10s is what we usually see in that slot, crossbones, etc. So kind of nice there. You know, but this one has a bit more specific, I would say, of a requirement, in that you are going to have some affliction. Now, we have seen like so many random little affliction cards across multiple archetypes. You know, even like, you know, Marrow now works for like destroy or discard decks, etc. So there are a lot of ways to activate Ikari. He's probably not really technically restricted to specifically an affliction deck, but at the same time, you know, you're going to want to make sure you have some redundancy there, like enough ways to reliably afflict things that Ikari is not just going to get stuck in hand at any given point. There's also a little bit of a concern for me where it's like, if you've already afflicted something, then you might be kind of doubling down by playing a big guy there. So for instance, some of the bigger afflictions, think about like Omega Sentinel, for instance, right? If you use that as your trigger, like that's already a big power commitment. Do you want to double down or do you want to spread across, right? Like putting too much of your power in one location could definitely backfire in some cases. A bigger question I have for this one is just like need and deck fit. You know, if you look at affliction decks, do they really need a 4/12 in there? If you look at high Evo decks, I don't really think this fits on their affliction side of things. Like, it's probably okay, I guess, again, but I don't think they need it. It's probably just need that slot for something else instead. So I do just wonder, like, who's actually making space for this? Which deck is saying, I'm so excited about a 4/12 that I just really, really want to run this? I think it's possible it gets tossed in. I just, again, this has kind of been a little bit of a trend, which I'm sad about. I don't, you know, I want cards to be really exciting and make spots for themselves. I just think, again, this could get left out. I'm sure I'll make a video where we play some great Ikaris and it feels pretty good, but it's just like, do you need this card? No, probably not, right? Like, there's enough here. It's not doing anything so crazy, and, you know, occasionally will backfire enough that it does feel like a bit of a risk to run, where it's like, yes, I can play it, but I can't play it where I want to play it, if that makes sense. That's the risk more than being able to play it. If you're putting this in your deck, I think you'll pretty much always be able to play it by turn 4. It's just, will you be able to play it where you want to? For whatever reason, those limitations could definitely come to bite you. So, fine. I do like big dumb guys like this with restrictions. Just think this one will get left out. So then our final card here is Stick. This is a 4/3 with on reveal, give the next card you play power equal to this card's power. So yet another buffer here. This is kind of a combination between like Maverick and Forge. You know, Maverick referencing his own power, but Forge being an on reveal targeting the next card that you play. Unfortunately, when I look at Stick, I do think those are both like two unfavorable comparisons, because at a baseline, of course, this is just a 4/3 that buffs 3. That's terrible. Like, let's be clear. That's really, really bad. That's barely better than Forge, and it costs twice as much. And regards to like transfer of power, this is a little bigger than current Maverick, although it's the same as previous Maverick. But the downside there is this costs more once again, and it's less timing flexible. Like Maverick, you can play down on turn 3 and buff whatever you want later, right? You can also use it with stuff like Shulao, so that you can buff the Maverick and then activate. Stick is weird there because like you know it needs to be buffed in hand basically for this on reveal to work, unlike something like Shulao, whereas Maverick can work both in hand and on board as far as its buffs are concerned. I also think about something like Shuri, where it's like, you know, Shuri is all about a 4-drop buffer that can scale something really big, but you know, Shuri references the value of the card played next. This references himself, so he requires kind of more setup than Shuri. She just kind of works with any big thing. Now, of course, she has some location restrictions, but any comparison I make against like similar cards in a similar space, I feel like Stick just falls short across all those directions. And now we also have like Wolverine Horseman of War, which is another 4-drop that makes your other stuff bigger. And I think I like Wolverine Horseman of War better as well, because it's like, you know, it's just total output seems a lot higher without as much support. Like, yes, of course, if you hit this 3 times with a Gwyn pool, like, yeah, okay, a 4/9 that buffs something by 9, that could definitely be better than all those other examples I gave, right? Like, yes, if everything goes perfectly, if Storm, Horseman of Famine's a great example, right? Push this to a 4/5, like, that's pretty interesting, right? That's better, but it's still like, it takes a lot of support and it takes good timing, and like, you just don't need to do that. All the other options exist. I think they're just better ways, and every deck's gonna be like, yeah, Stick would kind of work, but I like this option better. I like this option better. I like this option better. All of those scenarios, it's just like Stick's gonna get left behind, I think, because I don't think he really does anything better than any of those decks. Like, technically kind of has more options than some of them, but Maverick in particular is a really damning comparison, I think, for Stick. Like, it's really, really hard for Stick to feel better than Maverick in my estimation. Just like one base power extra, but also cost and timing restrictions. So to me, I think this card just looks really tough. I think this needs like a base stat line boost to feel a little bit more competitive. All right, so that wraps it up on all the cards. Let's go ahead and rate these each from 1 to 4 stars, starting with the best and going to the worst. Shadowlands Daredevil is a 4-star card. Punisher War Machine is a 4-star card. Wilson Fisk is a 3-star card. Lady Bullseye is a 3-star card. Muse is a 3-star card. Karen Page is a 3-star card. Ikari is a 2-star card. Stick is a 1-star card. And yeah, there you go. Honestly, most of those 3-star cards, I would actually put it like 2.5 stars. Basically, I think they're like not quite bad enough to be 2, but not really solidly 3 stars either. I just don't do half-star ratings, so I had to commit one way or the other. Decided to be a little more positive. But again, the takeaway on like all of those 3-star cards is basically like, yeah, I think these are playable. Like, yeah, these will be pretty solid if you put them in your deck. You just don't need to necessarily. That's where I land. I do think Shadowlands Daredevil, though, has some potential to carve out a spot. And I do think Punisher War Machine, like I said, could be kind of broken. But also, this is like really like 4 stars or like 2 stars, right? Like, I think it's going to land in one of either 2 spots. Just kind of have to see how it plays. Also kind of have to see if the opponent gets information on that location or not. So ultimately, mixed bag month. I think not the most exciting month as far as I'm concerned. Really from like a character standpoint or from a power level standpoint. I don't love like street level Marvel as much as I like cosmic Marvel, but some of you might be very different. I mean, this is a cool looking Daredevil, and it's a super cool Punisher War Machine. That far and away the most exciting card for me. So anyway, share your thoughts on these cards down below. Thanks much as always for watching, and I guess I will see you around.